So students at home studied those characters. They decided which one they were going to impersonate. So they also chose, for example, tools or, yes, backgrounds. And each one in turn performed that character while the other students were writing down notes and asking questions in Italian.
You're listening to Speaking of Language, a podcast recorded at the Language Resource Center at Cornell University. Each week, we explore a topic related to language pedagogy and second language acquisition. This week on Speaking of Language,
Giulia Andreoni suggests ways to incorporate music and drama into language teaching and learning.
Welcome to a new episode of Speaking of Language. I'm Angelica Kramer, the director of the Language Resource Center at Cornell University.
And I'm Sam Lupowitz, the LRC's media manager. Today, we are joined by Giulia Andreoni. Giulia just completed her Ph.D. in the Department of Romance Studies with a major concentration in Italian literature.
We will talk about how she connects her passion for theater and music with language teaching.
Welcome to Speaking of Language, Giulia.
Thank you.
So first of all, congratulations are in order. Completed your dissertation. This is wonderful.
Thanks, yes.
Can you share with us a little bit about your background and your journey with languages?
Absolutely. My passion for language originated while I was attending an Anglo-American international elementary school in Rome, in Italy. And so I experienced a dual language education. We had classes both in English, other classes in Italian. So from there, I went to a high school. I chose classics, so we also studied ancient Greek and Latin. And so I further developed my passion for languages. So then I pursued a bachelor and master's degrees in languages and literatures at Sapienza University of Rome. So in English, in Italian, and also in Spanish.
Wow.
And from there, at Cornell, my PhD is in Romance Studies. As you were saying, so in Italian, and with minors in comparative literature and English.
Wonderful.
So your research interests include theater, specifically drama pedagogy. How have you incorporated theater and drama techniques into your language classes?
Yes, so especially for the fall semester, I tried to think ways to also create a sense of community, notwithstanding the situation with COVID, so lessons on Zoom. So what I did is I tried to adapt and also devise drama activities that would work in an online setting. So, for example, something called Zoom Drama Grammar that we did with students, something called Online Hot Seat Guess Who. So that was fun also. And then students also did some brief screen performance dialogues. So there are ways to do it also online, and it works. And what I liked about it is that it gave a sense of community. Students were engaged. So theater really does that for you. And also by simulating authentic context, students have a communicative purpose.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about these new innovative tasks that you did on Zoom, like the online hot seat Guess Who or your Zoom grammar?
Yes, sure. So we started with something a little bit easier. So, for example, the drama grammar is something that is done in language classrooms with theater, and so I simply adapted it to the medium, online medium. And students practically, so they have a series of vocabulary. So, for example, verbs. Eating, sleeping, painting, and they also embody those verbs. So they perform those verbs and they say the word in Italian, Spanish, etc. And so what happens is that also the body has memory. So students memorize this vocabulary also by watching other students perform and themselves performing that action. So sleeping, eating. And this is quite simple, so it's not particularly elaborated, but it really helps sort of trigger a kinesthetic learning.
Yeah.
So this was one. Yes.
Yeah, what about, I'm intrigued by your online hot seat Guess Who? How did you implement that? What is that?
Yes. So, well, you know the game Guess Who, where
Yeah.
there are various characters exactly with specific traits. So what I did is I prepared, so there were a series of characters with characteristics, so color of hair, etc., and things that they loved doing. So students at home studied those characters. They decided which one they were going to impersonate. So they also chose, for example, tools or, yes, backgrounds.
Yeah.
And what I did to make them feel comfortable at the beginning was to divide them in breakout rooms. And each one in turn performed that character while the other students were writing down notes and asking questions in Italian. So they wrote notes, and then at a certain point, each had to guess who the character was.
Fun. What has the impact been on tasks like this, on your students' learning? And have you noticed any differences between implementing these types of tasks in the face-to-face classroom versus now in the online mediated classroom?
I feel that my impression is that it reduces their foreign language anxiety. So through the what is protection of the role, they really forget about being anxious speaking the language, and they focus on the communicative purpose. So this is something that, yes, I noticed. What else? I think it also helps with empathy. So being in someone else's shoes. So that component is fundamental. And then if I saw differences, so I started using drama, especially this semester. So I really had the experience online. So before there were some games, but I was mainly using theater for writing seminars.
Okay.
Well, you've also taught various sections in our languages across the curriculum program tied to seminars on music. The sections I know have covered Western music, Baroque music, and opera. How do you teach about music in the target language?
Yes, so I have taught music through opera libretti. So I thought that could be interesting also for students from the music department. So for example, we focused on Mozart's Le nozze di Figaro, the marriage of Figaro. So what we did is we analyzed, for example, the text of an aria sung by the young page Cherubino. And it's called Voi che sapete che cos'è amor, you who know what love is. So we had the text, and so I devised various exercises based on vocabulary, because they have to know both the vocabulary of modern Italian, but also of, let's say, more 18th century Italian, because students from music do have to know about opera libretti themselves. And it's a bit different. So from cor to cuore, so these kind of exercises. And also grammar. So they had to they had some grammar exercises from present to past tense, reading and comprehension. And then there was a part on oral production where students discussed going to the Met. And so there was a dialogue based on this real or imaginary experience. And so they could practice a bit of dialogue.
Fun. Have you noticed any differences in the receptiveness of students and their engagement in these languages across the curriculum classes compared to regular language classes? So if the class section actually is tied to a different discipline rather than being, quote unquote, just a language class.
Right, yes. So I noticed that they were particularly attentive and interested in learning the vocabulary. So even more than practicing grammar. Because what happens, even students from the music department, they many times they encounter text in Italian and they have to sort of infer the meaning. So it was important for them to know the basic and most important recurring words in Italian and then try to make out the general sense of what they were reading. So we really also concentrated on that.
If our listeners are interested in more ideas on how to integrate theater or music into their teaching, where would you suggest they start?
Yes, so I would say, so just to start by including theatrical games, small-scale forms, so they're easily accessible, and examples on how to do this, and more information can be found in a journal called Scenario. It's a journal of performative teaching, learning, and research, so that's a good resource. There are also many books on theater games for the classroom. I've also noticed there are many workshops or conferences now online where teachers can become more familiar with these techniques. So, for example, drama in education days. And that is what I have done. And yes, I would advise.
Have you done a lot or anything with improvisation in your language classrooms?
So, for example, when they were performing small scenes from based on topics, for example, at the restaurant, so they had to perform a little bit. So they had general notes, but there was also an element of improvisation, and this really helps. Certainly, the element of improvisation was more stressed when I was teaching theater. Although I feel I'm not enough of an expert in terms of teaching operatic music. I mean, I was always partnered with a professor from the music department. I also followed his and her lessons, so I also learned from them. And so they had these double classes. So it seemed less improvisation, but I would put a question mark on that, yes.
Before we sign off, we'd like to ask you to share your favorite word in a language you speak, you love, you are learning. What is that favorite word of yours?
Yes, my favorite word is sun, because it's the first word that I learned in English when I was very young. So I am, have an emotional connection with the word.
Sun as in S-U-N, what's up?
Yes, exactly.
Shining down on us.
Nice. The bright sun.
Yes, we need more of that in Ithaca.
Indeed.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, thank you so much for speaking of language with us, Giulia.
Thank you.
Next week, we are introducing you to Planet Word, the world's first voice-activated museum in Washington, D.C. that provides interactive galleries and exhibits that bring words and language to life in all sorts of fun ways. Until then, auf Wiederhören!
The Language Resource Center is located on the ground floor of Stimson Hall on Cornell's main campus in Ithaca, New York. Check us out on the web at lrc.cornell.edu or look for Cornell LRC on Facebook and Twitter.
Speaking of Language is produced by Angelica Kramer and Sam Lupowitz.
Recorded by Sam Lupowitz.
Original music by Sam Lupowitz, Dan Gable, and Joe Gibson.
Thanks also to the College of Arts and Sciences at Cornell University.
As a reminder, the ideas and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of the College of Arts and Sciences or any other official entity of Cornell University.
We thank our listeners, and do stay tuned for our next episode.